Homeless girl saves a biker's son. A single act of defiance pulls her into a dangerous world of leather, loyalty, and lawless justice. She finds protection, power, and a forbidden love that will test everything she knows. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The rain had turned the alley behind the diner into a river of oily puddles and garbage. Stella huddled deeper into her doorway, pulling the thin, damp blanket over her head. She was counting the change she'd found in a payphone, enough for maybe a coffee if she was brave enough to go inside. That's when she heard the shaky voice. "Please, I didn't do anything. I was just waiting for my dad." Stella peeked out. Under the flickering backlight of the diner, a boy, maybe 14, was pressed against the brick wall. His leather jacket, too big for him, had a roaring panther patch on the back. In front of him was a cop, a big man with a thick mustache and a mean smile. He wasn't wearing his hat, and his nameplate said Officer BINNER. "Sure you didn't, kid?" Brenner's voice was like gravel. "We got a call about a drug deal back here, and what do I find? You looking shifty." He held up a small, clear plastic bag with white powder inside. "This looks like it fell right out of your pocket." The boy, Daniel, his face white with fear, shook his head fast. "No, that's not mine, I swear. I've never seen that." Stella's breath caught. She saw it clearly. The cop's broad back was to the rest of the alley, but from her angle she saw his other hand come from behind his own belt. He'd had the bag hidden there. He was moving to slip it into the boy's jacket pocket. Her stomach twisted. She knew this dance. Cops like this had run her off her last semi-dry spot under the bridge. They'd taken the last of her mom's things after the overdose, calling it evidence. A hot, familiar anger burned through her cold fear. Brenner's hand moved toward Daniel's pocket. Without thinking, Stella shot up from her doorway, the blanket falling into a puddle. "Hey," she shouted, her voice raw from disuse. Brenner jerked, his head snapping toward her. The bag disappeared back into his fist. "Get out of here, street rat," he snarled. "This doesn't concern you." "I saw you," Stella yelled, louder now, walking forward. She wanted witnesses, she needed noise. "I saw you take that bag from behind your back. You're trying to put it on him." The diner's back door swung open with a creak. A cook in a grease-stained apron stood there, holding a bag of trash, his eyes wide. A face appeared at the kitchen window. Brenner's expression changed. The fake calm was gone, replaced by a vicious glare aimed at Stella. "You're obstructing justice. I could take you in for that." "Then take me," Stella said, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was so thin, so dirty, but she stood straight. "And we'll all tell the same story to your sergeant, him, me, the cook." She pointed at the man frozen in the doorway. The sound was like thunder, but it was engines. Not one, but many, a deep, roaring growl that vibrated the puddles on the ground. Headlights cut through the alley mist from both ends. Motorcycles, dozens of them. They rolled in, silent now except for the putter of idling engines, surrounding the scene like a steel trap. The lead bike, a massive Harley, stopped a few feet from Brenner. The rider killed the engine and swung off. He was huge, with a beard shot through with gray and eyes so pale blue they looked like ice. He wore a leather cut covered in patches. The largest one on the back, read Reaper's Tide MC, above a skull with a ship's wheel. Below it, the rocker said President. He looked at Daniel. "You okay, son?" Daniel sagged in relief. "Dad, he was trying to plant drugs on me." The man's icy eyes moved to Officer Brenner. The cop took a step back, his hand going to his belt, but then he stopped, because every other biker, men and a few women with hard faces, had also dismounted. They stood silently, arms crossed, forming a wall of leather and denim. "That true, officer?" The president's voice was deceptively quiet. "I had probable cause," Brenner blustered, but the sweat on his temple glistened in the light. "This homeless girl is causing trouble, is all." The president, whose name was Mark, didn't even look at Stella. He kept his gaze locked on Brenner. "My son calls me, says he's being harassed. I show up, and you've got a bag in your hand, and a witness says you're planting it." He took one slow step forward. "You know who I am." Brenner swallowed. "Marcus Thorne." "Right, and you know Reaper's Tide doesn't start fights." Mark took another step. "But we sure as hell finish them. You walk away now. You forget my boy's face. You forget this alley, and you pray we forget yours." The threat hung in the damp air, heavier than the rain. Brenner's jaw worked. He looked at the crowd of bikers, at the cook, who was now holding up a phone, clearly recording. He shoved the bag into his own pocket, shoved past Mark with a last hate-filled glance at Stella, and marched to his squad car at the alley's mouth. A minute later, he was gone. The tension burst like a bubble. The bikers started chatting, some clapping Daniel on the shoulder. Mark finally turned to Stella. She felt small under his gaze. She was shivering, her clothes soaked, her hair matted. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Stella." "You hungry, Stella?" She just nodded, too tired and wired to speak. He pointed a thick finger toward his bike. "Get on, we'll get you a meal, it's the least we can do." She hesitated. Getting on the back of a stranger's motorcycle, a biker president's no less, was insane. But the smell of food from the diner was overwhelming, and the doorway behind her was cold and wet. She climbed on, holding onto the back of the seat, careful not to touch him. The clubhouse of the Reaper's Tide was not a dark, scary basement. It was a converted warehouse by the docks, big and loud and full of light. Music played, pool balls cracked, and laughter echoed. Stella sat at the end of the long bar, wolfing down a plate of fries and a burger, trying to be invisible. She cleaned up a little in the bathroom, but she still looked like what she was, a street kid. Mark sat on a stool next to her, nursing a beer. "You got family, Stella?" "No." "How old are you?" 19. It was almost true. She was 18 and a half. "How long on the street?" She shrugged, stuffing another fry in her mouth. "A while." Daniel came over, holding a soda. "Thank you," he said, earnest. "He would have arrested me. My dad would have had to do stuff to fix it. It would have been bad." Stella just nodded. Mark watched her. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the wariness, the stubborn set of her jaw. He saw something else, too, a survivor like him. "You need a place to stay?" he asked, casual, like he was offering a stick of gum. Stella froze, a fry halfway to her mouth. "What?" "We got rooms upstairs, empty ones, clean. You can lock the door from the inside." He took a sip of his beer. "You did a solid for my club today, for my family. Reaper's Tide pays its debts." "I don't want charity," she mumbled, but her heart was aching at the thought of a real bed, a locked door. "It's not charity, it's a business arrangement. You get a room. In return, you make yourself useful, help Lucy in the kitchen, sweep the floors, keep an eye on Daniel sometimes. God knows he needs a minder." He grinned at his son, who rolled his eyes. "Think about it." He slid a key across the bar to her. It was for room 7. Stella stared at it. This was crazy, dangerous, but the rain was starting to tap on the warehouse roof, and the memory of her wet blanket was fresh. Her fingers closed around the cold metal. "Okay," she whispered. The first week was a blur of strange comfort. Lucy, the club's matriarch and head cook, was a woman in her 50s with tattoos on her arms and a heart of gold. She didn't ask questions. She just gave Stella clean clothes, showed her the industrial washer and dryer, and put her to work peeling potatoes. "Earn your keep, kid," Lucy said, but she always slipped an extra cookie onto Stella's plate. Stella saw how the club worked. It wasn't just a gang, it was a business. They ran a legit garage, a towing service, and a bar, but there were whispers too, quiet meetings in Mark's office, suitcases full of cash being carried in late at night, men who didn't look like bikers coming and going. She kept her head down. She wasn't stupid. She knew what MC stood for at this level. One afternoon, she was in the garage, bringing a sandwich to Paul, the head mechanic. She saw Mark leaning over a motorcycle engine with another man, a handsome, dangerous-looking man with dark hair and intense green eyes named James. James was the club's sergeant at arms. "The shipment from the coast is coming in Thursday night," James was saying, his voice low. "The dirty cops are taken care of. The new ones are more cooperative." Mark straightened, wiping grease from his hands. "Good. We can't have another Brenner situation. He's still a problem. He's been asking around about Stella." Stella froze behind a tool cabinet, her breath catching. James's face darkened. "He touches a hair on her head, he's fish food." I know, but we need to be smart. She's under our protection. That's final. Mark's tone left no room for argument. He turned and saw her then. Instead of anger, he gave her a slow, knowing smile. See something interesting, little bird. She stepped out, holding up the sandwich for Paul. He walked toward her, and she felt that charge again, the one that made her skin feel too tight. He stopped very close. He smelled like engine oil, leather, and soap. You're safe here, Stella, he said, his voice just for her, but you should know what you're under. It's not a white picket fence. It's a fortress with teeth. You okay with that? She looked up into his icy blue eyes and saw not a threat, but a promise, a dangerous one. I've never been safe before, she said honestly. Teeth don't scare me. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Good. That night there was a party. The club was celebrating a good deal. The music was loud, the beer flowed, and the air was thick with smoke and laughter. Stella tried to stay in the kitchen with Lucy, but Daniel dragged her out, teaching her how to play pool badly. She was laughing, a real, unfettered laugh for the first time in years, when she felt a gaze on her. Mark was leaning against his office doorway, watching her from across the room. He had a glass of whiskey in his hand. His look wasn't fatherly. It was intense, appreciative, and it sent a jolt of heat straight through her. She looked away, flustered. Later, as she was heading upstairs to her room, he was there, at the bottom of the steps. Having fun? He asked. Yeah, they're nice. They're loyal, he corrected gently, and they like you. You've got spine. He reached out and gently tapped a finger under her chin, making her look at him. It's a good quality. His touch was electric. The noise of the party faded away. It was just the two of them in the dim stairwell. His eyes dropped to her lips for a second, and her heart nearly stopped. Then he stepped back, giving her space to pass. Sleep well, Stella. She practically ran up the stairs, her mind racing. He was twice her age. He was a criminal. He was her protector. It was a mess. A few days later, she was in town with Lucy, buying supplies. Lucy went into a specialty store, and Stella waited outside, enjoying the sun. A black and white police cruiser slowed to a stop at the curb. Officer Brenner was driving. He looked at her through the passenger window, his face a mask of cold hatred. Looks like you landed on your feet, street rat. Found yourself some new friends in low places. He leaned over. But leather isn't bulletproof, and alliances change. You tell Thorne he doesn't own this town, and I haven't forgotten. He drove off just as Lucy came out. Who was that? Lucy asked, her eyes sharp. No one, Stella said, but her hands were shaking. Back at the clubhouse, Stella went straight to Mark's office. She knocked and entered when he called. He was at his desk, James standing in front of it. They both looked up. Brenner, Stella said, her voice tight. He stopped me in town. He threatened me. He said to tell you you don't own this town. Mark's expression went from calm to deadly in an instant. The ice in his eyes seemed to freeze the room. He looked at James. That's it. He's crossed the line. James nodded, a grim smile on his face. I'll handle the details. No, Mark said, standing up. He came around the desk and stopped in front of Stella. This is personal. He threatened one of ours. A direct message needs to be sent. He put a hand on her shoulder. It was heavy, warm, solid. You stay here in the clubhouse. Don't go out alone until I say so. Understand? She nodded, mesmerized by the raw power radiating from him. This wasn't just a biker. This was a king defending his territory, and for some insane reason, he decided she was part of it. That evening, the clubhouse was quieter than usual. A core group of members, the inner circle, was preparing to leave. They wore their cuts, their faces serious. Mark came downstairs dressed entirely in black leather. He saw Stella watching from the balcony above and gave her a single, slow nod. They rode out, the sound of their engines a rolling thunder of intent. She waited for hours, sitting with Lucy, who tried to distract her with stories of the club's early days. It was past midnight when the engines returned. The men filed back in. Some had bruised knuckles. All had a look of cold satisfaction. Mark walked in last. His eyes found Stella immediately. He walked over to her, the crowd parting for him. He didn't say a word. He just cupped her face in his two large, rough hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. He searched her eyes, then leaned in and pressed a firm, heated kiss to her forehead. It wasn't a romantic kiss. It was a claiming, a promise, a stamp. "It's done," he said, his voice a low rumble only she could hear. "He won't bother you again, ever." The room was silent, everyone watching. This was a public declaration. Stella wasn't just a stray they'd taken in. Mark Thorne had just shown everyone she was under his personal protection. She was part of the tide. Weeks turned into a month. Stella blossomed. With regular food, safety, and purpose, she filled out. The haunted look left her eyes. She laughed more. She even started working part-time at the legit garage, answering phones, her quick mind impressing everyone. Her chemistry with Mark was a constant, charged undercurrent, lingering looks in the hallway, his hand on the small of her back, getting her through a crowd, the way he'd bring her a hot chocolate without her asking after a long day. It was a slow, delicious burn. One night the club had a bonfire on the beach behind the warehouse. Daniel was off with friends. Members were drinking, talking. Stella sat on a log, watching the flames. Mark sat down beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "You look good here," he said, staring into the fire. By the water, it suits you." "It beats a damp doorway," she said softly. He turned to look at her. The firelight danced in his eyes. "I'm not a good man, Stella. I've done things. I'll do more things to keep what's mine." "I know. I'm too old for you. That's my choice." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers trailing down her jaw. "This life, it's not giving up an empire. It's holding it. It's dirty and it's hard and it's forever. You understand that?" She understood. He was offering her a place in his world, not as a charity case, but as something more. She leaned into his touch. "I understand." He closed the distance. His lips met hers and the world exploded. The kiss was everything she'd imagined, possessive, heated, demanding, but underneath it all, there was a terrifying tenderness. It was the kiss of a man who'd spent his life building walls, finally letting someone in. She kissed him back, pouring all her fear, her hope, her newfound strength into it. When they finally pulled apart, breathing heavily, the sounds of the party came back, but they were in their own bubble. "Your room or mine?" he asked, his voice husky. She smiled, a real, bold smile. "Mine, it has a lock." He stood, pulling her up with him. They walked back toward the clubhouse, hand in hand, not hiding from anyone. The message was clear. Later, in the dark of her small room, with the sounds of the harbor drifting through the window, he traced the scars on her arms, the ones from life on the street. "No one will ever hurt you again," he vowed, his lips against her skin. "You're mine now, and I protect what's mine." Stella believed him. For the first time since her mother died, she felt truly, fiercely safe. She had traded a cold, lonely freedom for a gilded, dangerous cage. But as he held her, as she listened to the steady beat of his heart, she knew she wouldn't trade it back for anything in the world. She had saved a biker's son, and in return she had been saved by the biker king. And her new life, complicated, thrilling, and full of love, was just beginning. But outside the fortress, old enemies licked their wounds, and in the world of the Reaper's tide, peace was never permanent. The real change, the storm that would test everything, was still on the horizon. The morning after the bonfire, everything was different, and yet completely the same. Stella woke up alone in her bed, the smell of Mark's leather and his spicy soap on her pillow. For a panicked second, she thought she'd dreamed it. But then she saw the single red rose on her bedside table, still wet with dew, and a note in messy handwriting. "Garage, 9 a.m., don't be late, M." A giddy, nervous laugh bubbled out of her. He was still the boss. She got ready, pulling on her clean jeans and a fresh t-shirt, feeling a new awareness of her own body, of the memory of his hands on her skin. The clubhouse was quiet, just Lucy clanging pans in the kitchen. "Morning, sunshine," Lucy sang out, a knowing glint in her eye. She slid a plate of eggs and bacon across the counter. "Eat, you'll need your strength." Stella blushed furiously. "Lucy." "Honey, I've been here since before Mark had his first bike. Nothing gets past me, and for what it's worth, I'm glad. He's been a ghost in this place for too long." Lucy's smile was warm, motherly. "Now eat. The king has summoned you." At 9 a.m. sharp, Stella walked into the garage. It was busy, the roar of engines and the smell of gasoline filling the air. Mark was in the office, a glass-walled room overlooking the bays. He was on the phone, his back to her, but he must have seen her reflection in the window because he held up a finger. 1 minute. He finished his call and turned. His gaze swept over her, hot and appreciative, but his face was all business. "Close the door." She did, the noise of the garage becoming a muted hum. "Sit," he gestured to a chair. He leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. The position made his shoulders look even broader. "We need to talk about your position." "My position," Stella's heart sank. Was this a brush-off? A thanks for last night, but this is work speech. "You're not just Lucy's helper anymore. You're smart. You've got a good head for numbers. Paul says you've already straightened out his parts inventory." He uncrossed his arms and picked up a folder, handing it to her. "This is the book for the towing service. It's a mess. The guy who was doing it was creatively accounting. I want you to fix it. Learn the legit side of our business, the real business." Stella opened the folder. It was full of invoices, receipts, spreadsheets. It was overwhelming, but it was also trust. Tangible, heavy trust. "You want me to do your books? I want you to make sense of them. James will show you the ropes, the particularities of our cash flow." He gave her a look that said, "You know what I mean. This isn't a game, Stella. This is responsibility. You'll get a salary, a real one. You'll earn it." Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. This was better than flowers. This was a future. "Okay, I can do that." "I know you can." He pushed off the desk and walked over to her. He cupped her chin, his thumbs stroking her lip. The shift from boss to lover was instant, electrifying. "But my office hours are over at 6. After that," he leaned down and kissed her, a deep, slow promise that made her toes curl. "You report directly to me." Life settled into a thrilling, dual rhythm. By day, she was Stella the bookkeeper, learning from the sharp, dangerous James, who turned out to be a financial wizard with a terrifying glare. He was patient with her in his own gruff way. "See this?" he'd say, pointing to a large, round number deposit. "That's from the bar, probably. This one here," pointing to a smaller, odd-numbered cash entry, "that's from the other bar. Don't ask questions about the other bar." By night, she was Stella, Mark's girl. It wasn't announced, but it wasn't hidden. They ate dinner together, often with Daniel, who seemed genuinely happy about it. They watched movies in his apartment above the clubhouse, a spacious place full of books and surprisingly good art. He was a voracious reader, a fact that stunned her. He'd catch her looking at his shelves and say, "What? You think a man who runs an empire can't enjoy a good spy novel?" And then he'd pull her into his lap, and the spy novel would be forgotten. The chemistry between them was a living thing. A charged look across a crowded room could make her breath catch. The simple act of him handing her a wrench in the garage, his fingers brushing hers, felt like a spark. It was intense, romantic, and deeply physical, a constant hum of attraction that was both safe and wildly dangerous. One afternoon, a month into her new role, James was called away. "Keep going through those supplier invoices," he told her. "Match them to the shipping manifests. Mark needs it done by tonight." Stella worked diligently in the quiet office. She found a discrepancy. A shipment of high-performance tires had been invoiced twice. It was a lot of money. She pulled the files, cross-referencing. It wasn't a mistake. The second invoice was a fake, the account number different. It was embezzlement. And the only other person who had access to these books was the previous bookkeeper, a weaselly man named Carl who'd been let go when Stella started. She waited until Mark returned from a meeting. She laid it out on his desk, her findings clear. Carl was skimming, probably for the last 6 months. He was smart about it, hiding it in the parts orders. Mark studied the papers, his face darkening. It wasn't about the money. It was about the betrayal, the weakness in his organization. He looked up at her, his icy eyes blazing. "You found this in one afternoon, what James missed for months." She nodded, suddenly nervous. "I just followed the numbers." He stood, came around the desk, and before she could react, he grabbed her and kissed her hard. It was a kiss of pure, fierce pride. "You are a goddamn treasure, Stella," he growled against her mouth. Then he let her go, his business face back on. "Don't mention this to anyone, not yet. That night the mood in the clubhouse was tense. Carl was brought in. He was sweating, pleading. Mark sat in his throne-like chair at the head of the main room, the club members forming a loose circle. Stella watched from the balcony, hidden in shadow. "You stole from the club, Carl," Mark said, his voice chillingly calm. "You stole from your brothers, you know the rules." "Mark, please, it was a mistake. I'll pay it back." "It wasn't a mistake, it was a choice." Mark nodded to James and Paul. They grabbed Carl by the arms. "You're out, you're never seen in this town again. Every cent is returned by the end of the week, with 50% VIG. If you fail, or if I ever see your face, the consequences will be final." It was terrifying. It was justice, mafia style. Stella watched as the broken man was escorted out. She should have been scared, but all she felt was a fierce, protective pride for Mark. He wasn't cruel. He was decisive. He kept his empire strong so everyone under his protection could be safe. Later, in his bed, she traced the scars on his knuckles. What would have happened if he didn't pay? Mark caught her hand, kissed her palm. "You don't need to know the details. Just know that the rules are the rules for a reason. They keep the whole ship afloat." He pulled her closer. "And you saved us a lot more trouble, my little financial detective." Things were good, too good. The storm hit on a Thursday. Stella was in the office, finishing the quarterly taxes for the garage. Daniel burst in, his face pale. "Stella, it's Dad. He and James, they went to meet the new suppliers at the docks. There was an ambush. Cops are everywhere." Her blood ran cold. "Is he arrested?" "I don't know. The radio just crackled." Paul took a crew and raced out. The next 2 hours were the longest of Stella's life. She sat with Lucy and Daniel in the kitchen, jumping at every sound. Finally, the roar of returning engines. Mark walked in, flanked by James and Paul. Mark had a cut on his forehead, his leather jacket was torn, and he was radiating a fury so potent it filled the room. "Brenner," he spat the name like poison. "He's not a cop anymore, got fired after our talk. Now he's working security for the Black Dogs." The Black Dogs were a smaller, ruthless crew from the next city over, rivals who'd been trying to muscle in on Reaper's Tide territory for years. "He set us up, tipped off the cops about a fake drug shipment. He wanted us caught with product we didn't even have." "How did you get out?" Stella asked, her voice small. James grinned, a nasty, sharp thing. "We're not amateurs. We had our own lookouts, saw the cops coming a mile away. The meeting was clean, but they tried to box us in on the bridge, had to leave the bikes, go through the old drainage tunnel." He looked at Mark's torn jacket. Was a tight squeeze. Mark's eyes found Stella. "He did this to get to me, because of you, because I took you in and he lost his badge over it. This is a declaration of war." A cold dread settled in Stella's stomach. She was the catalyst. She had brought this down on them. As if reading her mind, Mark strode over and gripped her shoulders. "Listen to me. This is not your fault. This is on him. He made his choices. Now he's going to live with the consequences." He turned to the room, his voice rising to a command. "We meet in the war room in 10. The Black Dogs and their new pet have just signed their death warrant." The clubhouse transformed into a military bunker. Weapons were cleaned and distributed. Maps were laid out. Stella felt useless, a civilian in a war zone. She tried to help Lucy prepare food for the men, but her hands were shaking. Daniel found her. "Hey, don't look like that. Dad's the best at this. He'll end it." "But people could get hurt, Daniel, because of me." "People will get hurt because Brenner's a corrupt, vengeful jerk," Daniel corrected, sounding so much like his father. "You saved me. The club protects its own. That's the deal." The planning went on for hours. Stella finally retreated to her room, but sleep was impossible. Around 3 a.m. there was a soft knock. It was Mark. He looked exhausted, the weight of his empire heavy on his shoulders. He didn't say anything, just walked in, pulled off his boots and cut, and lay down on her bed, pulling her into his arms. He just held her, his face buried in her hair. "I have a plan," he said into the darkness, "but it's risky, and I need you to do something for me." "Anything," she whispered. "I need you to be bait." She stiffened in his arms. He shushed her gently, his hands stroking her back. "Not like that, safe bait. I need Brenner to think he has a clean shot at getting to you to humiliate me. He's driven by ego now. We'll use it. But you will be surrounded by my best men every second. You will be the safest person in this city. Do you trust me?" She looked up at him in the dim light. This man, who ruled with an iron fist but whispered poetry against her skin, who had given her a home, a purpose, a love she'd never dreamed of. She saw the worry in his eyes, the fear not for his empire, but for her. "I trust you," she said. 2 days later, the word was carefully leaked through channels. Mark Thorne's new girl, the homeless rat who started it all, would be going to a specific, high-end downtown bank on Friday afternoon to set up a trust fund. A sign of his favor, of her new, privileged life. It was the kind of thing that would make Brenner's blood boil with jealousy and rage. Friday came, Stella dressed in new clothes bought for the occasion, elegant but understated. She looked like a rich man's beloved girlfriend. Mark kissed her deeply before she got into the car with James and 2 other huge enforcers. "Remember, you're just walking in, talking to the manager for 15 minutes and walking out. We'll be everywhere." The drive was tense. The bank visit went without a hitch. The manager, a club associate, played his part perfectly. As Stella walked out, holding a fake account brochure, she felt exposed on the sunny sidewalk. That's when it happened. A black van screeched to a halt at the curb. The side door slid open, and Brenner, dressed in tactical gear but no uniform, leaped out. He had a wild look in his eyes. He grabbed for her. "Thought you were untouchable," he snarled. He never laid a hand on her. James moved like a snake. He was between them in an instant, his gun pressing into Brenner's ribs under his own jacket. "Bad move, ex-cop," James murmured. At the same time, the 2 enforcers flanked them, shielding the scene. From everywhere, Reaper's Tide members appeared. From cafes, from cars, from alleyways. They surrounded the van, which held 2 shocked black dogs. It was a total, silent takeover in the heart of the city. Mark's truck rolled up. He got out, looking like a king surveying a conquered land. He walked up to Brenner, who was now held firmly by James. "You just attempted a kidnapping in broad daylight," Mark said, loud enough for the growing crowd of civilians to hear. "With witnesses and my security cameras." He pointed to a nearby building where Paul gave a thumbs up from a window. "You're done." Sirens wailed, real police, called by the club the moment the van appeared. Brenner, seeing his old colleagues arrive, their faces hard, finally realized the depth of his mistake. He hadn't outsmarted the Reaper's Tide. He walked right into their trap. He was hauled away, not by rivals, but by the law for a long, long time. The black dogs, seeing their plan crumble and surrounded by a superior force, surrendered quietly. Their brief war was over before it began. Back at the clubhouse, the celebration was epic. They had neutralized a threat, solidified their territory, and done it with cleverness rather than a bloody street war. Stella was hailed as a hero, the brave queen who stood as bait. Late that night, with the party still raging below, Mark took Stella to the quiet roof of the warehouse. The city lights glittered below, the harbor stretched out dark and endless. "You were incredible," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, cool as ice. She leaned back into him. "I was terrified." "That's what brave is, being terrified and doing it anyway." He turned her to face him. His expression was more serious than she'd ever seen it. "Stella, this life, it's not going to change. There will always be another Brenner, another black dog. This empire, I don't give it up. I hold it, I build it, I defend it. And I want you by my side while I do it. Not just in my bed, not just doing my books. As my partner, my old lady." The words hung in the salty air. In club law, this was more than a proposal. It was a merger. It was forever. Tears streamed down Stella's face. She thought of the hungry, cold girl in the alley who had nothing to lose. That girl had seen injustice and shouted into the darkness. And the darkness had answered with a roaring engine, a warm bed, a hard man with a soft heart, and a family forged in steel and loyalty. She looked out at the empire he'd built, the lights, the water, the rumbling heartbeat of the club below. It was dirty and hard and forever, and it was hers. She looked back at him, at his ice-blue eyes waiting for her answer, and she smiled through her tears. "Yes, Thank you for riding with us on this journey. Would you have had the courage to speak up like Stella did, knowing the danger? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe for more tailies where one brave choice changes an entire life.